We're only 1 month into the new year, but already Saudi Arabia and the YouTubers are threatening to take over boxing. This is After the Bell, Mirror Fighting's boxing show in association with Betfair.
Hey is the WBA heavyweight champion of the world!
Look like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
The Mirror brings you After the Bell in association with Betfair.
Welcome to the first After the Bell of the new year. It may be a new year, but we have the same panel here. Declan Taylor, George Groves. George, you're still retired?
Yeah, still retired, yeah.
We had to check just in case there was any breaking news. We will start this week to take a quick look back at last Thursday's action in Miami. The card headlined by Demetrius Andrade's WBO middleweight title defence against Luke Keeler. All the attention, of course, came in the supporting bout between Jake Paul and Ann Essen-Gibb, not his real name. But we'll come back to that later when we discuss YouTube boxing. Let's start with the real stuff. Andrade's a tricky one, George. He's obviously very good, very skillful, but difficult to watch at times. And he put Keeler down in the first 5 seconds in, and then in the second took another 7 rounds to get rid of him. Where do you think, did we learn anything about him, and where does he fit in with the middleweights at the moment?
Yeah, well, it was a really interesting start, and I think it was and right up to the second round when he looked like I think Keeler was out, and then he neck bounced off the bottom rope, which is kind of scary sometimes, and maybe that woke him up. The round was near enough over, he got through it, and then Andrade just couldn't finish. He's just so clumsy, so sloppy, so unorthodox. He was switching southpaw to orthodox at times, and he can be really hard to watch. And if you look at the other middleweights out there, as you say, you got the likely one is Charlo, and I think Charlo beats him. He's a big, almost a bit of a throwback American fighter where he stands tall at time, but he looks like he's got a lot of power in both hands. And then if you go past Charlo, then you've got Golovkin, Alvarez maybe, the middleweights in the mix. But he done the job, but after that second round, you kind of maybe it's just me, but you're kind of I'm ready for this to be finished now. And it felt like it dragged on a bit. But fair play to Keeler, who hung on in there. It was great that he got stopped when it did in the ninth. Otherwise, I think the corner definitely would have had to have pulled him out at that point because he didn't have nothing left. But yeah, I'm not sure where you place Andrade. I think there's guys definitely out there in front of him.
Declan, it's difficult in this era. Everybody wants to see things quickly. Everyone wants to be entertained. So what do you do with Andrade?
I don't know. It's a hard one. As George said, it's sort of he did the first bit, did the hard bit. The same thing happened when he won the title against Court Dockwell in Boston. It was he was there, and it was right, okay, he's done it now, but you sort of have to hang on for a few rounds or however long it goes on for, and no one likes that. No one likes seeing that, and I think it might just be a mental thing. He just switches off a bit, and you wonder whether if he had someone really good in front of him, like an elite name like the ones on the list, Charlo and Golovkin, Canelo, people like that, whether that would happen. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe that would bring out the best in him. But it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? And I think that's why he's not getting these big fights, because it's not particularly interesting to watch. The Saunders fight looked like it was going to happen until that drug test failing and the eventual vacation of that belt. Now I'm thinking that is a fight I don't want to see at all. Two slick guys who sort of making each other miss all night. No thanks. And I think a lot of people will look at Andrade and think, why would I want to fight him for? He's not going to make me look very good, and it's going to go on a while. But the thing is, he's really good though as well. He's talented, isn't he? Very skillful. And I wonder whether if he had a couple of big names on his record and stuff, you are talking about a pound for pound sort of guy just from his skill set. But again, he hasn't looked great at middleweight either. Whether that's right for him, I don't really know. But the frustrating thing is that the Zone have got all these names in the mix, and we're still not getting the big fights that we want, really.
Yeah. We seem to say that a lot, George, about fighters for some reason at middleweight, super middleweight, that they need to get up for a big fight. We say it about Billy Joe Saunders. Even Callum Smith wasn't great last time out against John Lloyd. Does he need a big fight? But these big fights they're not coming at the moment, and you can't just keep using that as an excuse, can you?
No, definitely not. And you can't expect to get a big fight. There's a reason why Alvarez is not interested in Callum Smith or Billy Joe Saunders, because they've stunk the place out time and time again, you know, and they blame it on being undermotivated or what, who knows. But you can't afford to do that. If you're overmatched and the guy in front of you needs to be put away, then you put him away. Like, that's what you have to do. You have to entertain it first and foremost. And I think that the logical fight, really, two super middleweight world champions in that division would be Saunders versus Smith. I don't know why it isn't being talked about more, why it isn't on the cards to be being made, and then that will be a fight that hopefully will push one of them on for a mega fight out in the States, because the person will have 2 belts off the back of a unification fight. Makes a lot of sense. So, but some of these guys like Saunders, maybe they still talk about maybe dropping back down to middleweight. Never won a world title, Eubank Junior, but again, similar, going from super middleweight to middleweight. These guys have got to pick a weight division maybe and stick with it.
But what's it like when you've obviously had, in your career, you had like clearly massive fights against guys that you knew were real top tier, and then obviously you had fights that weren't as big against guys who clearly weren't as good. How does that feel like in the gym? You know, like 6 months before, 3 months before, and you think, right, it's clear that it's a very different kettle of fish between the two things. How do you switch it on so it always feels the same, always feels like a mega fight?
It kind of won't. I mean, it's impossible for it to feel like that, because it won't just be what's going on in the gym. It'll be in the build-up. You know, people just stopping you in the street, talking to you about a big fight, maybe having a little bit of fear factor of the event, or that, you know, the guy in front of you is he's a force. But you got to still go out there and get the job done. You know, and you want to look good. You know, it can all come crumbling down real quick with a bad performance. It's tough, but that I'm talking about. They are extremes, like how flat Callum Smith has been, and how flat Billy Joe Saunders has been in bars, where Saunders, I was talking to my friend yesterday about it, and you go through the resume and the big fights, and just like, you know, he Lemieux, how long ago was that? Like, that's the name that springs to mind, Lemieux, and it feels like forever ago.
That was like 2017 or something.
Yeah. So before then, the win over Andy Lee, and then the win over Eubank Junior, which was close, was a split decision at domestic level. So other than that, he hasn't had the big names, hasn't had the big fights, and a lot of the time hasn't really shone and struggled. Maybe been down the cards and to pull it out of the bag. So they've got to go out and perform and look good to then be in the mix for the big fights, and then you will always box better because you have to rise to the occasion. But until then, you look at someone like Canelo. You know, when is he ever flat? You know, he always gets the job done and gets it done in style. That's why guys like them are top of the tree.
It does seem that everybody's clinging onto their ticket in the Canelo lottery at the moment. Smith, Saunders, both want that fight in May, and maybe if Canelo goes elsewhere, then that fight might finally happen. In terms of Andrade, it looks like Jamal Charlo is the most likely fight next, 5-6 with Betfair. Saunders 3-1, Golovkin 6-1, but they're likely to be tied up elsewhere. In terms of Andrade against the champions, he is favourite only against Golovkin. No, that's a lie. He is favourite against Golovkin, and then against Saunders, and Charlo, pretty much even 10-11. He's
hard to beat, isn't he? I mean, no one's going to have an easy night against him. Clearly, out of those names, you can see the Saunders fight being nip and tuck, like really nothing in it, and then it can go either way, really. And then, you know, Golovkin, Charlo are going to want to try and put it on him, and who knows. But again, it's intangibles. We don't really know. We haven't seen the best of Andrade, I don't think, and we won't until we see that fight. So it's kind of hard to, I don't say it's not hard to pick against him, but you couldn't do it with any confidence, because it might be that he's got this incredible performance in him if he had someone in front of him to draw it out of him. A bit like Saunders and Lemieux on a different level, but you know, that was when everyone was writing him off, saying, right, he's going to get chin now because Lemieux's such a big puncher, and then actually that's what brought the best out of him, and maybe that's what we're waiting for with Andrade, but until it gets there we can't really make that sort of evaluation on him.
We will wait and see. Also on Thursday night, 3 world titles changed hands. Joseph Diaz beat Tevin Farmer to win the IBF Super Featherweight title, and Murajan Akhmadaliev beat Daniel Roman to win the WBA and IBF Bantamweight titles. Next up, we'll take a look at this weekend's action as Kell Brook returns to action. This weekend sees the return of Kell Brook after 14 months out. He takes on Mark DeLuca in Sheffield. I feel like we talk about this every time, the last couple of times Kell Brook's fought now. what is a good result for him this weekend? What can he possibly show us that we don't already know?
I don't know. I thought you were going to mention Amir Khan then straight away. I thought you were going to go straight into it. No, it's true. I don't know. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's a bit like the Zarafa fight where he dropped him, I think, in like pretty early on, or at least he absolutely beat him up for a round or two, and then it sort of went the distance. So if he just blows him away in a round or two, then they're sort of like, well, you know, what's he learnt from that? If it goes the distance, he's up against it because people think, well, he's finished, he's struggling with these guys. I don't really know. I suppose he wants to look good over a few rounds, try and get a stoppage and get out of there and get back on track. But it's been obviously 14 months out. Like at this stage in his career, it's not good. It's not a good look for him. What I will say, he looks in amazing shape. He looks like he's really putting it in. So it's not like he's done or he's finished or he's thinking about hanging him up. He's still there. He's still hanging around. But it's just, I see a couple of people call him the forgotten man of British boxing. He really is. But a couple of wins and you can turn that around.
He might look good, George, but if you think back to those back-to-back fights, Gennady Golovkin and Errol Spence, the damage that did, certainly to his eyes.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a grueling sport, boxing. It's a grueling sport, and it, you know, once you get to the top level, it just keeps rolling on. And in an ideal world, you do want to have a break, and maybe this is him. He took this break, you know. I can't remember the exact instance, but it was almost like someone said, and Kell Brook's retired. And he's like, wait, no, I haven't. Someone had made an assumption. And maybe he just took time out to just have a rest, you know, actually rest the body and then have a nice long time to get back to fighting fitness. You don't want to go back in at the top level if you've had a rest anyway. Because of his name and probably Sky's need for main events at the moment, he's had to go in at a main event. It would have been much better probably for him to have come in as a chief support, part of a big card, maybe a pay-per-view card. Because getting your body ready for fighting through a whole training camp is a process, you know, especially if you've had a bit of a layoff. You say he looks in great shape. I mean, he naturally always probably would, but hopefully his mind has had a bit of a rest now as well. Getting over them big fights and big losses, those big injuries, and seeing what he's got left. Because sometimes if you're running on empty and you're still pushing it, you are just going to continually burn out. Whereas if he's had a break, maybe we'll get a refreshed and maybe rejuvenated Kell Brook, who, he's coming in against a guy who he should blast out. And even if he does blast him out in a round or two, at least he's banked that 12 or 16-week camp or whatever he's been doing. And then he uses that momentum now to push on for a bigger fight. I think he's he will definitely, has shown over the years, one of Britain's best talents. And if he can sort of roll back the years now, there's a bright future for him if he's feeling refreshed. Definitely.
He had a bit of a psychological blow after that Errol Spence fight because he obviously lost to Golovkin, but everyone said, well, it's a middleweight anyway. He wasn't expected to win. He put up a good show actually before he got stopped. But the Spence fight really took it out of him because felt like his first defeat, kind of. And he said afterwards, people stopped texting him. People, all his mates, people, hangers-on were gone. You hear it all the time in boxing that, you know, that's what happens. But he didn't really believe that was going to happen until it did. And it took a lot for him to get over that and bounce back from that. And he's talked about being depressed and stuff. And George will know, I guess it's a lonely sport. And especially when you're the one who has to go in the gym and do all the work and get prepared for these fights. And then all you get is criticism for him. And he's probably made a few quid. So he's thinking, do I really need this? But it seems that he's made that decision over the last 14 months. There was that little spell where it seemed like he'd retired and he split with Dominic Ingle and stuff like that, and it was all a bit strange with him. But I get it. We see it a lot that people seem to be right on the bottom and sort of just about on the way out, and then all it takes to get it rolling again is just a couple of wins. And I think there's big money for him to be made still because he's still at that sort of weight division, those where he's up and down between 47 and 54, where he can make money and have big fights. There was talk about Terence Crawford and stuff like that. He's an attractive name in England and in America, so certainly a lot of money for him to be made.
Perhaps still, unbelievably, perhaps over the last few years, the biggest fight has always been Amir Khan. And of course, if he wins on Saturday, questions will be asked again. Is that a fight we still want to see?
I do. I'd quite like to see it. You know, if they both go on a bit of a run of like poor performances, then it will really lose its appeal. But not boxing is better than boxing bad sometimes, and being out the ring for a little while. But I definitely would like to see it.
I'd rather see that than him against DeLuca.
Yeah,
really. So yeah, it's still an attractive fight. I don't forget, it could have been colossal, couldn't it? At one point, really would have been unbelievable, but it's not going to be like that now. But it still will be one of the most attractive fights for him and for Khan.
Yeah, I mean, if it feels like Khan's been around forever.
Yeah.
I mean, for as long as I've been boxing, like Amir Khan was, there, from 17 years old at the Olympics, and then, he's been around for feels like forever. So it would be strange to not have him mentioned, really.
Yeah.
Brook is 25-1 on with Betfair to beat DeLuca on Saturday, which probably says it all. Also on the card, Terry Harper takes on Eve Wallstrom in a world title fight. Kid Galahad is back in another IBF featherweight final eliminator, so we could see him against Josh Warrington at some point again. And Dave Allen is back. Looks like he's going to take on Dorian Darch. Dave Allen, an interesting character. Again, looked like he might be done.
He's still going.
Still going.
He's doing great things up in Doncaster. He's got his training lads now, and he had a big problem. He's had a lot of mental health issues. He retired from boxing, totally switched off from it. He's back. He's still going. I still think I'd love to see him in fights like Tom Little that's been spoken about. That's a good fun fight. A lot of people think, he shouldn't be boxing. It's dangerous for him and stuff like that. But I'm always of that opinion that if you can't, no one has any right to tell people when they should box or when they shouldn't. We said the same with Nigel Benn. And if it keeps him happy, keeps him sane, then why not? I mean, yeah, Dorian Dutch, he's a level above who he's going to be fighting, whoever it is in Sheffield, I'm sure. I guess he wants to win a British title. He's still got ambitions, and I say fair play to him, really.
I think also there are different expectations. Different boxers have different expectations of what they want from the sport, and I get the sense Dave Allen is quite happy in Doncaster. If you talk to him, the money he made against David Price, the money he made against Lucas Brown, we're not talking tens of millions, but more than enough for someone like him. So if he's happy enough to keep on fighting at this level, maybe not earning millions, then we've got to let him, surely.
Well, yeah, I mean, heavyweights sort of live forever. That's what I always say. It doesn't matter what their record is. If they're happy to get in there and fight, then away they go. I think I wouldn't like to see him being overmatched again, like we've seen over the years. I think he's a happy and humble man now, and definitely stick to the level that would make for entertaining fights, and do it for as long as you choose to. He's not a huge heavyweight. I mean, the size difference between him and David Price was crazy. So in some ways that was like maybe a bit of a mismatch, but on paper in the build up, the records fitted. But I mean, heavyweights, they live forever. And if there's a demand for it, or they put it together and the TV back it and we're told to get excited about it, we will. So
if it sort of feels like it's on his terms now, doesn't it? Because when he boxed like Dillian White and Luis Ortiz and stuff, it was almost like he had no choice, or at least that was how it felt. Obviously, no one put a gun to his head, but and when he boxed in France and stuff. But the fact is, the guy from Doncaster has headlined the O2, big show, won by knockout. He's headlined over in France against Tony Yoka, Olympic champion. All these things he's got on the CV already. He's sort of like he's paid his due, and I feel like now he's got that feeling of like, right, okay, I'm just going to do what I want to do now, and that means not being overmatched necessarily. The fact was, if he'd beaten David Price, he would have fought Alexander Povetkin for a lot of money. It's mad to think, and I think even he realises that. So yeah, he's still got fun fights for him, and money to be made, and it keeps him happy, keeps him busy. Why not?
And I think a wise decision to turn down the Daniel Dubois fight as well, which shows at least that he's thinking about himself rather than just, putting on the fights that maybe other people would want him to have, as you say. Next up, we'll take a look at what's making the news in boxing this week. So probably the biggest news in boxing recently is Josh Taylor's decision to leave both Barry and Shane McGuigan. Obviously now the unified world champion. He decided, I think, to leave Cyclone as his manager, so that meant Barry was pushed to one side, and Shane, of course, has said he wasn't going to train a fighter who'd left his dad, so Josh now looking for a new trainer. He signed up with Top Rank and with MTK. George, you've obviously trained with Josh before. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised because a lot of the McGuigan gym fighters had moved on after Carl Frampton made the move, and then it was, everyone knows they don't know the details, but you can tell it's messy, and there's court proceedings, and they're suing each other. And Taylor said, I assume that, Frampton, even though very close to Frampton, my best work's going to be done training with Shane McGuigan. And that was kind of how it was panning out. And he went into the WBSS and won it. He come out unified champion. So I assume that everything was sort of hunky-dory. And even though he's under maybe a promoter management contract with Cyclone, who is, as you say, Barry McGuigan, they're free and happy to work with other promoters, and they signed him into the World Boxing Series, which is great opportunity for him, and he came out on top. So at that point, it was bizarre that he decided that he needed a change. Usually there's always something that's gone on in the background. Sometimes it can just be a little falling out over something else that escalates real quick. But he signed an advisory deal with MTK, which means I'm not exactly sure whether that's now they're his manager or whether that's to go alongside an existing Cyclone deal. But then he's gone off and he signed a promotional contract with Top Rank. So obviously that leads you to think that that's a setup for the Ramirez fight, where he can become undisputed and win all the belts. But yeah, I've got to be honest, a shocker, because things seem to be going really well for him, and definitely Shane as a coach, in my opinion, was getting the best out of him. Don't get me wrong, Taylor's a very talented fighter, extremely talented fighter, and it's he hasn't got this far solely because of Shane. It's down to him, but having a good coach to advise you along the way can be priceless. So I was really shocked.
Shane's in a difficult position, Declan, really, because of course publicly he has to come out and say, if a fighter doesn't want to work with my dad or with Cyclone, I can't train them. But surely in the back of the mind he's just a bit tired of this now.
That won't, obviously he's in a strange position. A lot of trainers won't be in that position where they just stick with their fighter, and it must be really tough for Shane, because for obviously everyone in that camp, because really it looks like, at least from the outside, it looks like they didn't put a foot wrong with him. The matchmaking was perfect. Look at what he's become in this many fights. He's obviously improved. He's from the amateur that he was to the fighter he is now as a result of what Shane did with him. A bit, probably to a bigger extent, but to a lesser extent, the same happened with Carl Frampton and what happened to him under the tutelage, or at least part of that team, and then that fell off as well. For various reasons. So it's always tough to see. And then from Shane's point of view, the amount of hours he's put in the gym with him and with all his fighters, obviously. But so then for it just to go like that, it must just be devastating, really, because as well as the jewel in the crown for him. And now that's just totally tainted. But he's got other fighters. He'll come again. But I guess he's got no choice but to have that position of, he's not just a coach, is he? He's not just a trainer. He's part of the family. It's a family thing. That comes with its strengths and its pluses to have a family unit running a show. But this is one of the drawbacks. He can't possibly train someone who has left the family management bit as well, because it's not going to work, is it? It surely can't work for a family that close.
No. In terms of where Josh goes next, George, I think he's looked at Ben Davison, looked at Adam Booth. He doesn't seem to be in a rush. He's talked about maybe going to America. Any idea of who might be best for him next?
I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure whether he wants to stay in Scotland and then bring a coach in if there isn't one there available. I see that he was in the Adam Booth gym. I think Adam Booth's now an MTK trainer or something along those lines. So that might be something that makes sense. And then I think Freddie Roach was spoke about, or maybe one of the big names out in the States. He's spent a lot of time sort of away from home doing camps. He used to obviously come to London before then, part of the GB squad. He'd be in Sheffield and places like that. So he's probably not too bothered about having to travel to get the best. But I'm not exactly sure who would be the best coach for him, because he's got a very particular style. It's he needs almost reining in. He's got that fighting spirit and that tenacity and aggression that you would want in an elite level fighter, but it needs a time and a place for it, because he has such sharp hands and reactions, and good footwork when he uses it, that you don't need to be in a dogfight all the time. So it takes a strong trainer, a strong personality to get through to him. And I think it'll be a big transitional period for him now, where he's got to find a new coach, someone who he can put faith and trust in. When I assume it was a trust issue is why he's moved on, at some point something's broke down. So, so I feel sorry for the McGuigans for all the time and money they've invested into Taylor and getting him to that stage. They definitely didn't deserve him to sort of move on, and you can see from the statements that have been put out, it wasn't amicable, it wasn't agreed. But I also kind of feel sorry for all parties, because it might have a negative effect on Taylor's career now, and that would be such a shame.
It's a strange situation to be in. Normally, if you change trainer, maybe it's after a defeat, you want a fresh approach. But he's a unified world champion. He's won all 16 fights. Surely the last thing he needs is to train with someone who will probably want to input their own style into him, whether it's subtle or not, just because they don't want to be just simply doing what Shane did.
You'd think that, wouldn't you? And that there will be a transition, and it might not be straight away. And there isn't like there's any problems that you could, obviously any trainer worth his salt will look at him and think, right, I can improve that and that and that. But it's not like glaring errors. If anything, he's just getting better and better. So it'd be interesting to see who he chooses. I wonder if Ben Davison might be a pick for him, because he's obviously got a lot of time on his hands now. He's worked with Billy Joe a lot. He was a southpaw, so it could be a good fit. Maybe he'd be up for going to Scotland. He basically dedicated his life to Tyson Fury for ages. Maybe he'd do the same with Josh Taylor. And he sort of landed on his feet a bit disrespectful. But what happened with Tyson Fury, him going straight in and being Tyson Fury's trainer, was unbelievable. Imagine then he comes out of that and goes and being Josh Taylor's trainer. That could be superb, and it really would be a chance for him to further cut his teeth. But yeah, I mean, what's it like though when you change trainers? How?
Yeah, it's tough. It's
like
real
day-to-day
tough.
basis, that must be weird.
Yeah, when the working relationship with Adam Booth broke down real quick, and I was weeks away from a first world title fight. So I messaged Paddy Fitzpatrick, who I'd done ad hoc work with, because Adam used to bring him in throughout camps. He was part of the camp where I boxed DeGale and a couple others, maybe before, definitely after. So someone I was familiar with, and I felt like that was probably the best option for me here. Someone who I know held pads well, respected his the way he saw fights and stuff like that, and that worked well. But when that relationship for me just wasn't working, I went with Shane McGuigan, who I had no previous relationship with. I just had to go off the basis of his success previous and the guys who was in the gym. And I visited him in Wandsworth, which ain't a million miles from my house, which was nice. He recently started working with David Hay, who I knew, which had that familiarity, which felt nice. And then as well as he had world champion Carl Frampton in the gym, and loads of great prospects in there as well. So took comfort from that. But I can imagine this is a much tougher, more difficult situation for Taylor, because essentially nothing was going wrong in the gym, you assume. Nothing was going wrong in the gym. You're unified world champion. It's not even like you just needed a change to freshen things up. The reason you're not working with your trainer anymore is because there was a breakdown in the management promotional side of things. So it's tough. It's always tough to juggle personalities in the gym. It's usually the trainer's job to do that, and usually there's just a natural hierarchy that's in the gym, and people are just happy with that, and it flows along, and you're trying to push each other along, because you're yourself trying to get on and improve and win the titles, earn the money. But what might be difficult for Shane is that not everyone's on the same page, because some fighters are underneath the Cyclone banner, and therefore, they go down a particular route, and then you got other fighters who just come in, like I did, Hay did, Luke Campbell, Lawrence Okoli, and they might feel like they've got a lot more freedom that fighters who are sort of signed in might not be so comfortable with. But I don't know. But I thought, as I say, they as a management setup, McGuigan's have worked with everyone. They're not exclusive to anything, so in many ways it's the best way to be, because when them opportunities come along, maybe a big money is invested in a particular setup or company, and you can dive in and reap the rewards of it, like they did with Taylor in the World Boxing Series.
You've started your coaching qualifications, Declan. This is your perfect opportunity
Could
to
be in
throw
there.
your hat
Could
into
be
the
in
ring.
there. No, more an amateur man, me.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you had your chance.
Yeah.
So we haven't yet had Tyson Fury's rematch with Deontay Wilder, and of course Anthony Joshua yet to announce his next opponent. We are already talking about an undisputed fight, not in London, not in Vegas, but in Saudi Arabia. I remember, Declan, when you came back from Saudi, the first thing you said was, "This will keep happening." So I'm guessing you're not surprised by Eddie Hearn saying,
No, get used to it.
Yeah.
Get used to it. It's going to happen, because, like what you said, why would anyone take 40 million quid when they can get 150 million quid? But it's like, you can't, there's no argument for that. And people go, oh, it'd be so much better if it was in England. But you can't, these guys are literally risking their lives for entertainment. They should get as much money as they want, really. Will it damage the sport over here long term? Maybe. Would it give the sport a boost if this fight was in London and everything that comes with it? Maybe. It's not guaranteed. But one thing's for sure is that the two guys in the middle should be getting paid as much as they want. And let's be honest, how long have we been speaking about these fights for? And they haven't happened. The one way they do happen is if someone comes along and says, here's some money that you cannot turn down. You can't, your handlers can't, your manager, your advisor. No one can say no to this, because the money's so ridiculous and so based on nothing that the fight actually happens. And that's really what we want to see. It's not ideal, but I think it's the way of the world now. And I'd be stunned if it ended up anywhere else.
I mean, Eddie Hearn will obviously take criticism because, well, he always does. But he said before the Joshua Ruiz fight, how can he go to Joshua and say, yeah, I can give you 40 million in Saudi Arabia, but can you please just take 20 to fight at Wembley? He can't, can he? He has to do what makes business sense for his fighter.
Yeah. I mean, that instance is, I doubt Joshua would have made much money at all, because Ruiz's rematch clause fee was so high. So by the time you factor in all the outgoing costs and to promote it at Wembley, and just losing that huge chunk of cash injection that would come from a Saudi site fee, and you probably assume that they did better pay-per-view sales because Brits couldn't get out to see the fight. There were Brits there, but everyone I spoke to was either an expat living in Dubai or works in and around the region. They're familiar with it. I didn't meet anyone who was just a normal boxing fan. Who I've been to Joshua's fight in Cardiff, I've been Wembley, and now I've been Jeddah. So money will always talk, and throughout history, it's thrown out some real bizarre locations for big fights. But if Fury beats Wilder, and then the unification is two Brits, and it's not in the UK, it's just so bizarre.
Yeah, it's sad.
So
as well.
bizarre, and it will be sad. I mean, I two Brits, me and Callum Smith fought at the final in Saudi Arabia. No one talks to me about it, which is nice, because I didn't win, but no one cared, no one saw it. And it was totally different, obviously, with heavyweights, with this build-up, with
but the
DAZN
Frotch fight, the Frotch rematch was of this similar ilk, where everyone was talking about it, everyone asking you about it constantly. What if someone had said to you, right, this is what you're going to get paid to fight at Wembley, treble it and do it in Saudi? What would you have thought?
I probably would have backed myself and said Wembley.
Really?
Because at that stage I was a bit more bullish, you know what I mean? And I thought, well, I'm beating him in front of everyone. My value is going up,
Yeah.
I mean, there was whispers around that, the fight was the Ruiz rematch with Joshua was in Saudi because they'd lost confidence in Joshua, and they thought if he loses, it might just be a little bit better in the rebuilding phase if it's not at Wembley or Cardiff or in the UK. If it's away in Saudi, maybe it just doesn't get the same sort of traction. He went out and he boxed Ruiz's ears off. Ruiz wasn't fit, and he's done the job. But yeah, I mean, coming back, you imagine that there'll be more of it, more big fights. But I didn't think they would want to do that. It would be sad for boxing. It would jeopardise boxing if that unification fight is in Saudi.
I mean, we are obviously talking about a fight quite a few months down the line. If it either happens, whether it's Joshua, I mean, it could be Alexander Usyk against Tyson Fury.
Yeah,
for the undisputed title. I feel like Joshua's got 2 mandatories. There could be another 2 Wilder Fury fights. Are we not? This is a long way away. Are we not getting ahead of ourselves?
We definitely are. And that's why I think the odds you've got listed down here for who's going to hold the belts at the end of 2020. That's why people like Wilder are 12-1 for any of the 3 that Joshua are holding, because it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Even regardless of all the money on offer in Saudi, you've got to think he's obviously going to rematch Fury. The talk is there's a 3rd fight, so then they'll fight again in the summer. Joshua's got Pulev, probably then Usyk. So we're talking like another year at least. Probably then later. At least the one good thing about Saudi is that it's sunny all the time, so they can go there at any point. Whereas over here, it's Wembley for a big one in the summer, or you've got to go to Cardiff, basically. So it could happen early next year, I don't know, but I would think that any big fight of this magnitude, those actual mega fights these days, Saudi's always going to be a front runner because they just seem to have endless money. I don't know if they'll get bored at some point and they'll go, okay, we're done with boxing actually for now. But right now, the money's there, and if you're a promoter or a fighter, you've got to be thinking, well, I'll just have some of that, why not?
Betfair make it 3-1 that there will be an undisputed heavyweight champion by the end of 2020. Any interest, or are we basically thinking it may well be as it is just now?
I wouldn't go near it. Probably shouldn't say that. I wouldn't go near 3-1 for that. And even when you look at the characters involved, you'd have to sort of nail your colours to the mast pretty emphatically, because they're obviously a couple of fights away from that happening. If you're a big Wilder fan, I suppose you could say, well, if he knocks out Fury in a round, there might not be the appetite for another 3rd fight, and then he'll get Joshua, and you fancy him to knock out Joshua as well. If you're in that camp, maybe 3-1 is reasonably tempting. If you're not in that camp, then it's probably not for you, that price.
This fight's that fight's got to be signed off real quick as well, because mandatories are going to start accumulating and racking up and just running out the clock. So if they had the winner of Fury Wilder signed in now to fight Joshua at the end of the year, or whoever has all the belts, then if that isn't signed off in the next couple of months, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah, they could. I mean, fight could happen. Say Joshua fought Wilder, he might have already relinquished the WBO, and Usyk might have the title, so it might still have that fight, but it's actually not for all the belts. So then the 3-1 looks even more tempting. But yeah, maybe put your money somewhere else, or lay against it, as Betfair will offer you as well.
Well, good save. We might be back next week after all. So we've left the dreaded word to last, YouTube boxing. Of course, Jake Paul needed less than a round to beat Anis and Gibb last week in the second such fight, following his brother Logan Paul's win over KSI last year. Like Saudi Arabia, I think this is here to stay. Of course, Jake Paul and KSI squared off in the ring last week. We now have Logan Paul and Antonio Brown of the NFL. That fight looks like it's happening. DAZN very keen to promote these, which I think said a lot about where their interest lies at the moment. George, your thoughts?
It's horrific. It's horrific. It's abysmal. It makes my skin crawl. It's do you know, I could get on board with the entertainment value, but why is it called professional boxing? It's so demeaning. Like, how do you distinguish the difference between Logan Paul and Demetrius Andrade? They're both professional boxers, like both undefeated, and they, so it was billed, the first one, KSI Logan Paul, as a laugh, and it was a one-off, and everyone knew it wouldn't be. And where does it now end? Because that fight of the weekend was a complete joke. I watched it. I didn't watch it live, didn't stay up for it or anything, but I watched it back. It was only a minute, so I thought I can invest a minute. And what are we watching? what are we watching? Because there isn't enough talented YouTubers to fulfill a league or whatever they're going to set up. I remember back in the day watching Ricky Gervais having a little white collar fight.
Grant Bovey.
That's where it is. Entertainment, you know. And you can put these guys on, even if you want to put them on a pro show, great, but don't call them professional boxers. And it's scary. It's scary because people soon won't be able to tell the difference. And it's not. I just don't find it any of it genuine. I've never really been a fan of the soap operas or the wrestling and things like this. And this is on par with that because none of it's real. And these guys are professional entertainers. You know, maybe there'd be some pros out there who can maybe learn a thing or two off these guys in that respect. But what if I'm a young fighter? A prospect at 17, I'm thinking, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep this boxing under the wraps and I'm going to open up my YouTube channel. Hope I make it as a YouTuber and then fight one of these fools in a few years' time and I'll know what I'm doing and just become the YouTube king. But it's not for me. I don't see its appeal. I'm very disappointed that it's getting so much coverage. I'm disappointed that the big promoters are backing it and trying to get people excited about it. I didn't watch Conor McGregor versus Mayweather because I didn't think it was a real fight, and that is light years ahead of the stuff that they're carving up now. So it's a sad situation for me. So that's my rant over.
But just to play devil's advocate slightly on that, you say it's not for me. It's clearly not for us because these guys first of all don't know what they do. The only one I knew was the guy who filmed someone who just committed suicide and thought, wow, that's a bit punchy. I mean, what's he doing that for? And then the guy who fought the weekend's actually his brother, so it's not even the notorious guy, it's the other bloke. So I don't know who these people are for a start, which doesn't help because you've got no connection to them, so you're thinking, I don't want to watch them fight. But the fact is, at the heart of it, boxing is about being an attraction, isn't it? It's about, that was how it started. That's the only reason people were fighting in the first place. It was an attraction. People wanted to watch you have a fight. The sad fact of the matter is that fight would have garnered far more interest in the world title fights on that card. That's just the way of the world now. And it's terrible and it's not nice for us as boxing people or boxing fans, but that's where the views are and the money is. And it's a sad reflection of the world now that actually the video I saw most from that weekend is Logan Paul facing down with the other guy who they're obviously going to fight now. So you've got, actually, it's about that pantomime factor of two guys shouting at each other, not because they hate each other or anything, but because they know if they do that, everyone's going to look at it and they're going to fight each other. And I've got a son, you've got young boys. The young kids are going to watch things like that and think, that's how I get on in the world, actually. I build myself into this sort of brand, this sort of entity, hope that people like me and are attracted to that, and buy into me and then somehow make money from that. And the way to do that is shouting and swearing, being obnoxious. I don't know if you saw the KSI Logan Paul presser. In fact, I think you were there. We were both there. And it was one of the most it was just ridiculous what these guys were doing. Like grown-up adult men are doing just weird, bizarre stuff on stage. You think this is how they get along in life and people watch that and engage with that. Maybe that's what we've got to prepare ourselves for the next 10 or 20 years. I know it's a bit sort of old, miserable old git, but it's true, isn't it?
No, but it's just,
like.
I agree, but it's just not pro boxing. So it needs a different outlet.
But maybe that's a reflection of the sport. It needs an injection.
I think boxing. Yeah, boxing is one of them sports where anyone can infiltrate it. You know, to become a professional, you don't really have to adhere to any standard. Do you know what I mean? I'm not talking about famous people. I'm talking about anyone. You know, before when I turned pro, you'd go to a meeting at the British Boxing Board of Control, and it's like, what's your background? Oh, I won 2 ABA titles. All right, you're good enough to turn pro. Like, and there were kids in the gym that were good fighters who probably could have got a license, but you know they never tried because they thought, well, what's boxing got for me if I can't get on. Now it's moved on where, you know, most white collar boxers now are looking at pro boxing because there's so many small hall shows, and that's good because every now and again there'll be one that crops up who is a bit better and excels on and becomes a bit of a name. But this sort of thing is just ridiculous. I mean, if Kim Kardashian wants to fight Donald Trump, I will watch it.
Yeah, that will get views.
I will watch it. I'll pay
views,
pay-per-view. But if they're are they pro boxers? They're not, are they? They're two celebrities having a fight. It'd be more entertaining if it just moves away from boxing. So, all right, we've had the fight in the boxing ring. Now let's have a skateboarding match, or let's have a wrestle. Let's have a UFC match. Let's let's go cliff climbing so you can survive. Let's do something else. I think that'll be entertaining, definitely. Yeah. But I'd love it to move away from boxing.
The big debate is whether it's damaging for boxing or good for boxing. Eddie Hearn and people would argue that it's good for boxing because you get all these fresh eyeballs on it. Not only new people, but actually young people watching the sport who maybe haven't engaged with it before. The fact is, I don't really think that's what's happening. I don't think people are watching it and going, oh, actually, I'll watch Tevin Farmer against Jojo Diaz now because that was fun. I don't really think that's happening. But is it damaging the sport? I think there's things that are doing far more damage at the moment, like multiple drug cheats, getting paid millions, getting big deals and just fighting as if it never happened. Multiple belts in weight classes and things like that. People working their whole life for a title shot, getting turned over by a rubbish judge. Like, those things need addressing. The problem is now this has come in and it's almost like changed the whole landscape, changed the whole rule book on boxing. And now we've got two guys clearly obviously never boxed as amateurs, never even been in the gym before, and it shows. Then the whole landscape changes. Where are we supposed to draw our sort of examples from now? It's weird, and I think it's only going to get more and more prevalent actually and common because people like channels networks like DAZN are going to think, well, all we need is subscribers actually, and if they're not getting it from the traditional sort of channels, then they're going to have to get them another way. Thomas Housey made a good point that boxing is really an old sport. Like, a lot of young people aren't engaging with boxing first and foremost, they go to other sports, whereas DAZN and just the fact that it's an over-the-top streaming service, that is a young person's thing, so the two don't dovetail, so they have to find a way for it to dovetail, and this seems to be it. YouTube, and you only go to one boxing presser. The YouTube media run the show now, really. Newspapers are just about, well, they're certainly only one part of it now. The YouTube media, especially in America, is so massive, and I think that's just how the sport's becoming. It might be because it's easy to infiltrate, and that's why it doesn't happen in other sports, but there is a way into boxing for anyone just about, isn't there? Especially if you've got a few quid, DAZN have. And if you're a YouTuber getting millions and millions of views, which they are, a streaming service is like, yes, please, we want you on our network.
It wouldn't matter to DAZN, obviously, because once you're subscribed, you're paying the money, but it'd be interesting to see how many people were watching at the point Jake Paul won, who then thought that was it over. But of course, you still had Demetrius Andrade, a very good world champion to come. I imagine the drop-off was significant. I
can't imagine any of them are going to stay and watch that. Like, you see it at shows now, don't you? You watch, people buy a ticket to watch their mate. As soon as that's done, they're gone. They're not hanging around necessarily. Boxing fans will stay, but there's loads of people like that. This is just an extreme version. They'll go, well, that's over. I've never heard of these guys. I don't even like boxing. So see you later. I'll turn off, probably watch YouTube again. I think that idea that it's helping the sport in any way is just bogus, really.
Well, a good argument.
When are you setting up a YouTube channel anyway?
Well, this is my YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. This is where it's coming.
Tens of subscriptions, followers. On that note, please do follow, subscribe, etc. All that. Good to start the week with a debate. We'll be back next week to look back at Kell Brook and no doubt to talk about Brook Can. May it happen again. Thanks for watching. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and of course at Mirror Fighting.